This is one of a series of interviews that we're doing, talking to people working on the front line of the search for a vaccine for COVID-19. The one name that everybody mentioned when we talked about this in the Canadian context was yours. So yeah, we're starting with the right person. So I wanted to ask you some questions about what you're doing. But first of all, to say thank you. Every single one of us has a reason to be grateful to you and your team and teams like yours across the world who are trying so hard to develop a vaccine for this terrible disease. And all of us know people who've got it and suffered from it. So a big thanks from all of us to start with. And then I wanted to ask you a really simple question to start with. How's it going?
Very good, very busy, as for many people, I think, in working on COVID. Very intense, but it's quite interesting actually. And but everything is good. Staying healthy and working hard.
Good. And so when did this work start? When were you tasked, or when did you decide to start the work on COVID?
I didn't have to decide. It was decided for me. I started on January the 2nd, or the 1st. I can't remember. But this was in the context more of the activity I have with WHO. But on the vaccine per se, I think we started the 3rd week of January.
What successes have you had so far? What are the highlights since the 1st of January of the work that you've been doing?
Well, our approach, if you want, or my belief is that we should be supporting as many vaccine strategy or vaccines as we can. The reason is that at the end we need more than one, hopefully, to be made available, because it's impossible that one single vaccine or vaccine strategy will be amenable to manufacturing to what is needed quickly. So as we see the first vaccine being approved, I think it will be important to continue to help and contribute to the number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, and hopefully, we can even get 10 or a dozen of those vaccines approved, so that manufacturing is being also helped by all these different ways to produce vaccines. I'm just gonna.
That also helps to address the concern that many people have, I think, which is about ensuring that everybody has access to this. So you think that one of the ways to deal with that access issue, equitable access, is to have as many different vaccines or variations on a theme, if you like, to allow more people to manufacture and for the supply to be greater.
That's right. I think it's better to be to have more, because I don't know of any single vaccine that has the capacity to manufacture billions of doses in a very short time. And but a lot of those vaccines actually have different ways to be produced, and different manufacturing capacity then can be put together and amplified. And I think it's important also to keep access as universal as possible in a short amount of time. I mean, that's what's key, basically.
Yeah, and so
in that context, I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I said I was going to say, in that context, we are helping 3 different, largely more than that, actually, probably 6 different vaccines, but there's 3 vaccines we are more focused on. And one is, has entered clinical trials, is with Inovio, that is receiving also support from CEPI. So it's currently in phase 1, going to phase 2 soon, normally. We have another one that is going to enter phase 1 in Canada. That is the one from Medicago. In the next 4 to 6 weeks, we hope. It's always subjected to approval by Health Canada. And third one that is really what we are doing in my group, which is a vaccine that is being developed in the context of a not-for-profit environment, so that basically the vaccine belongs to whoever gets it. So it belongs to the world community, if you want, and it's done like this with the objective and vision that it's going to be a very low cost vaccine, that anybody can get it for free. I'm talking about any nation or institute, as long as it's not for resale, if it's there for their population. But we know in this context, this is a bit of a new approach. and we know we are moving much lower because also we entirely depends on donation and the government support. There's no industry money into this at all.
So that to me is a really interesting model. So this is like the sort of the open source, open information model of scientific research. So that if you discover something really interesting, you put it out there and anybody can have access to it. And is this the first time that principle has been applied to a vaccine? Is this completely new in your knowledge?
As far as I know, yes. But I mean, you can see a lot of not-for-profit, organization that, for example, Gavi, for example, that distribute vaccine, but they purchase those vaccines that they distribute after that. There's a lot of not-for-profit environments in the development, distribution, not so much in the development actually, but in the distribution of vaccine. But as far as I know, we may not be the only one, but as far as I know, it's the only one that we see has a vaccine that we want to be entirely within a not-for-profit, so that at the end it will be given for free to an institution that wants to produce it, and that's a model. Yeah, I don't know anybody else doing this, but we'll see.
It's a fantastic model, and you said that because you don't have a sort of an industry element in it, it's slower. Where's the funding for that project coming from? Is that coming from the Canadian government? Is it coming from CEPI? Is it coming from Gavi? Not from Gavi because they don't do the research. Who is funding that work?
For now, the Canadian government is funding the preclinical studies, which we're completing now, and we have requested funding for phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials. I don't know if we will be fortunate enough to receive it, but we'll see. In the meantime, we are also in discussion with different donors because, quite frankly, a lot of it's connecting with a lot of people, including from the industry, that they really like the concept. Also, because our first focus actually was when we created this 2 years ago, was to focus on vaccine and therapeutics for which there is no economic incentives. Basically, vaccine that have a public health impact, but for which there's no real economics behind it. So there is no way that a private industry will invest into this, because they will lose money, and they know it from the start. But we see this as a very important niche, basically, to be in, because again, these vaccines and therapeutics can have a very important public health impact, and we've seen it for Ebola. Ebola is not the money maker by no means. You can ask Merck; they will confirm that. But it was at the same time, I think, a very important virus to control through vaccination and prevent through vaccination.
So how does the experience that you're having now with this pandemic compare with your experience with Ebola, which I know you worked on, with Zika? Have you learned the lessons? What are the lessons that you bring from those two? They went back, one pandemic, one was. What the lessons that you bring from that to the work you're doing now?
Oh, lots of lessons, and I can see a lot of challenges that are seen at a much smaller scale in different regions of Africa with Ebola are being seen right now on the global level. And there's a lot of example of this, including have you seen the issues on mask? To first not do not wear a mask at the population level, and then now wear a mask. And these are things that are actually common in small outbreaks that we have seen in the past, where and sometimes there is a void of knowledge to really support the concept, and then the message gets picked up, and then to readjust the message to evolving science is always more complicated. So I think there's a lot of similarities, of course, a lot of differences, with one being that the efforts right now are global and they are massive. It's absolutely incredible to see the number of people, the amount of resources that are being put forward to find a solution, a permanent solution, which is likely to involve a vaccine.
So you're talking about the global work that's going on in this, and you also mentioned that there's lots of different projects just like yours going on all around the world. One of the most talked about ones is at Oxford University. How important is international cooperation and collaboration from your perspective in combating and confronting a pandemic like this?
I think it's huge. We have been, us and many others, in contact with everybody has its own network, but I think these are very important to exchange in real time. I've seen tremendous level of collaboration. I think me, myself, and many others are very interested in the UK model, as we call it, of vaccine development, where you have focused. Everybody has a certain amount of resources, but you have taken the time to see where those resources would be better invested, and to basically support fewer projects, but with more resources. And of course, from my perspective and many others, this is a very good model. Of course, you may have the feeling that you don't reach out to everybody, and you don't have everybody part of the effort. But at the same time, if you want to go all the way through to a phase 3 and the end of a phase 3, you cannot support 200 projects. You need to keep this focus. And I think it's a very good model. So in this context, the global effort, so the UK work, the work in the US, in Europe, in Southeast Asia, and other places, Australia, I think is very inspiring somehow to see all this getting along, and I mean getting together and moving forward. There's always the discussion, and I'm always being asked, so what's the collaboration part versus competition? And I think you see both, but at the same time you see we're more collaborating than we don't compete on our side, but we see competition, and it's a different model.
Yeah, I mean, somebody asked me, I did an interview a couple of weeks ago, and somebody asked me about the competitive element to it. Competition in something like this is going to be damaging rather than helpful. Obviously, there's informal competition amongst you, because you'd all like to be the person to be able to put your hand up and say, yes, I found it first. But it's not about that. And I think particularly when you're talking about the next stage, which is development and then distribution, it can't be competitive, because it's not about who gets there first. It's about everybody needing it, because we can't unless everybody has access to it, then you might as well not let anybody have access to it.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I personally think that the competition doesn't have its space there. The competition is against the virus, if you want, and the race is against the virus, not against any other team or anything. Personally, I will tell you this: I'll feel sorry for the team that crosses the line first, actually, and it won't be us, because they will be under extreme pressure and scrutiny, and it won't be easy. And this is also why it's going to be important to look at getting more people and more teams and more vaccine through the line, and to help more people and the global community faster and better.
Yeah. So I know people like you hate this question, but what sort of timescale do you think we're talking about?
Listen, I've been saying, 18 months from the beginning, 12 to 18 months, 12 being the best. I think the 18 months comes from the Ebola experience. This is what it took to go from phase 1 to phase 3 to the end of the phase 3. But people maybe are not realizing that from the end of the phase 3, it took 4 years for the vaccine to be licensed. So in this case right now, assuming that the virus keeps transmitting and spreading, I don't think we're going to wait 4 years between the end of a phase 3 to a licensure. At the same time, there's all these delays that you don't anticipate often from the beginning and had time. But I will say this: when I hear the team in the UK saying in the fall, I find this extremely inspiring, extremely optimistic. I'll take it with a big grain of caution on my side. But at the same time, I think it's healthy to have the bar very high and to try to meet it. And if you cannot meet it, that's fine. But if you can meet it and even exceed it, even better. Yeah. So, I think it's putting everybody back, which is what I like. Is people are now, okay, well, if they are talking about the fall, let's see how we can make this happen also, or shortly after, So I think that's great.
And that next week, my Prime Minister will be hosting, it will be a virtual meeting, not a real meeting, of the Global Alliance, the Gavi, the Vaccines Alliance. So
Yeah.
what would you like to see come out of that meeting? If you could, if you could decide the day after, what are the things that you would like to see those world leaders agreeing on at that meeting?
Yeah, I think that there is a really important need for better global coordination. Not to say what needs to be done, but what maybe should be done, or what is optimal for the global community. And I think you'll understand this very well with this example. Is that there's over 100 vaccine right now advancing. What will be hard now? We know that there will not be 100 vaccine going through the licensure, right? So we need some coordination, in my view, even maybe a board or a committee that will, again, just recommend that maybe some vaccines should be getting more focus and some others less. Mm-hmm. In a view that we start down selecting all these 100 something and focus on the most promising one as we advance. It doesn't mean that some that are let's say get less focus will ultimately not succeed. I'm not saying this. It's just to try to support the one that have more chances to succeed quickly. And if we don't get into this kind of coordination, I'm afraid nobody's going to want to let go his own platform. So we'll see those 100 platform maybe growing instead of going from 100 to the top 10 or 20 that we really need to get through.
Yeah, so that's essentially replicating the approach that the UK government has taken, saying these are the most promising ones. Let's do that on a global level.
That's right. So actually, as you have initiated that from the start, I think it would be good for you to maybe to think about how you can be the one that suggests such a mechanism and I know it's not easy, because it's not easy for a group to recommend, well, this vaccine may not be the highest priority right now for A, B, C, D reason. To be told, for me to be told my vaccine is not a priority anymore. But it's for me to be big enough and I think grown up enough to say, okay, that's fine. For now, I'll put it aside and I'll help somebody else the best I can. And I think this should be what people get from that. Not your vaccine is not good enough, and so stop working. It's not that. It's to be part now to somebody else's effort to move forward.
Is there something about what you're doing, about what your team is doing, about what your group is doing that we don't know that you would like people to know? What is it about what you're doing that you feel is not well enough understood in the world at large?
That's a very good question. The one thing again is the not-for-profit. I'm so excited by this new approach. We'll probably be the last to cross that line of licensure. It may not be even for COVID. It may be for another indication. But for me now, it's very close to my heart that we complete one vaccine all the way to at least robust safety and if we can potency data, so that that vaccine, whether COVID again or something else that is not of economic potential, can be accumulating, for example, phase 2 data and be of utility later. Again, in that open platform, free to access, and the not-for-profit, concept still creates good job. It's based on the same thing as the healthcare system in Canada, which is basically not-for-profit, and the UK, which is not-for-profit but creates good job, and so it's good. It's still good for the economy, and so I think it's this. I will say this that people don't know yet, but I can disclose this as a tease of this new platform. This is being administered with a tattooing machine that actually injects the vaccine into the intradermal space. And so it reduces the tension. It makes the vaccine much more potent. We can do it, reach the same protection with less doses, with less vaccine. And it's, it's low tech. There is so many places where they tattoo in an emergency or a case like now actually would be a good technology where you could only have one healthcare personnel on site, but you would have tattooing artists who are the best at tattooing, right?
What a great
Administer the
concept.
vaccine.
Go to the
Yeah.
tattoo parlor for your vaccine.
Yeah, that's exactly.
That's something that that's something that your team has come up with.
Yes, with the engineer, because the concept of tattooing for vaccination has been tried before, but there was a lot of variation. And the reason is that a tattoo machine really pokes holes in the skin, and then the ink, in the case of a ink tattoo, diffuses in the skin through passive diffusion. This device actually injects with the positive pressure, very low pressure, but it does inject. So the needles are normal hollow needles where the liquids gets through. And there's a guide that it doesn't matter the pressure you put in; it's always injecting perfectly into the intradermal space. The real name is ionate, actually, for oscillated needle array system, something like this.
Okay.
And but it looks like a tattooing machine. It's actually an off-the-shelf human grade tattooing machine that was modified by the engineer, on which you just pop the vial, the vaccine vial, and then you can start injecting.